Lady Death is the gripping memoir of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the most lethal, fiery female sniper in history. Dive into the harrowing and heroic account of a young Soviet woman who became a legend during World War II with 309 confirmed kills. The summer of 1932 brought a significant change to our family's life. We moved from the remote township of Bogoslav in the south of the Kiev region to the capital of Ukraine and took up residence in an official apartment granted to my father, Mikhail Ivanovich Belov, as an employee of the NKVD, the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs. He had been appointed to a position in the central offices of this authority in recognition of his conscientious fulfillment of his duties. He was a solid, stern man, devoted to the service. In his younger days, he had started work as a fitter at a big factory, spent some time at the front during the First World War, joined the Communist Party, taken part in the revolutionary events in Petrograd, then served as a regimental commissar in the 24th Samara Simbirsk Iron Division and fought against the White Guard forces of Kolchak in the central Volga region and the southern Urals. He was demobilized from the Red Army in 1923 at the age of 28. He retained his attachment to the military uniform to the end of his days, and we generally saw him in the same attire, a khaki gabardine service jacket with a turned-down collar and the Order of the Red Banner on his chest. His trousers were dark blue, flared at the thigh like riding breeches, and the outfit was completed with calf leather officer's boots. Naturally, Dad had the last word in any family disputes if they ever arose. My lovely mother, Elena Tofimovna Belova, a graduate of the girls' grammar school in the city of Vladimir, knew how to mollify Dad's stern nut-twisted nature. She was a fine-looking woman with a willowy figure, luxuriant dark brown hair, and brown eyes that lit up her face. She had a good knowledge of foreign languages and taught them at school. The pupils loved her. By turning lessons into games, she ensured they achieved excellent retention of all European words strange to the Russian ear. Under her tutelage, the children not only read the languages superbly but also spoke them well. She devoted herself just as much to us, my elder sister, Valentina, and me. Thanks to her, we were soon introduced to Russian classical literature. The works of Pushkin, Lermontov, Gogol, Leo Tolstoy, Chekhov, Maxim, Gorky, and Kuprin were all in our home library. Reflecting her gentle, dreamy character, my sister proved more receptive to literature and fiction. I was attracted by history, or more precisely, the military annals of our great country. Before moving to Bogoslav, we had lived in the city of Belaya Zerkov, Kiev region, for several years. There, I attended school number 3 and spent my childhood and adolescent years carefree. On Station Street, we formed a close gang of friends. We played at Cossacks and bandits, splashed around in flat-bottomed boats on the local river Ros in the summer, roamed through the old and beautiful Alexandria Park, and raided neighborhood orchards in the autumn. I was the leading spirit of a gang of teenage boys, because I was the best shot with a catapult, could run faster than anybody, swam well, and was never afraid of getting into a fight, being the first to strike any offender on the cheek with my fist. These backyard pursuits ended when I was barely 15 years old. The change happened suddenly, over a single day. Looking back, I can compare it to the end of a world, a voluntary blindness, a loss of reason. Such was my first schoolgirl love. The memory of it remains with me for the rest of my life in the form of this man's surname, Pavlichenko. Fortunately, my son Rostislav is not at all like his father. He has a kind, tranquil nature and an appearance characteristic of our family. Brown eyes, thick dark hair, tall stature, and solid build. He is of Belov stock and continues our traditions of service to the homeland. Slava graduated with distinction from Moscow University's law faculty and the KGB, Senior College. He bears the title of a Soviet officer with honor. I am proud of him. At our new home in Kiev, we settled in quite quickly and began to get used to the big, noisy capital city. We did not see much of Dad. He was kept at work until late. Thus, our heart-to-heart talks with him usually took place in the kitchen after supper. Mother would put the samovar on the table, and over a cup of tea, we discussed any topics with our parents and asked them questions. The main question soon came up. "What do you plan to do now, my dear children?" asked Dad, sipping the hot tea. "We don't know yet," answered Valentina, going first by right of seniority. "You should think about a job," he said. "What kind of job?" asked my sister in surprise. "A good job, in a good workplace with a good salary." "But Dad," I broke in, "I've only done 7 years at school. I want to study further." "It's never too late to study, Lyudmila," said Dad firmly. "But now is the very time to begin your work in life and with the right information on the application form, especially since I've already made arrangements and they are prepared to take you." "Where's this?" My sister pouted in a show of defiance. "At the arsenal factory." From the Ascalled Tomb Park, you could see the broad, smooth, watery expanse of the river, the Dnieper, stretching out on your left and on your right, the straight and fairly short Arsenal Street, renamed Moscow Street in 1942. At the start of the street stood a very imposing building. This was the Arsenal Workshops, built under Nicholas I. They say the Tsar himself laid the first brick in their foundations. The walls were 2 meters thick, 2 stories high, and the bricks were light yellow, which is why the locals began to refer to the building as the Teal House. However, neither the workshops nor the factory adjoining it had anything to do with the delicate artifacts from clay. They had been founded on the orders of Empress Catherine the Great and constructed over a lengthy period from 1784 to 1803. They made cannons, gun carriages, rifles, bayonets, sabers, broadswords, and various other pieces of military equipment. During the Soviet period, the works also mastered the production of items necessary for the economy: plows, locks, twin-horse carts, and equipment for mills and sugar refineries. The arsenal staff worked with total commitment, and in 1923 they received an award from the government of Ukraine, the Order of the Red Labor Banner. The factory building appealed to me at first sight. It bore a strong resemblance to a fortress, rectilinear in shape, with a large internal yard, a tower, rounded outer walls, with the ground layer adorned with a large ornamental wooden facing. This building looked as if it had come from an engraving of an ancient battle. All that was lacking was a moat below the walls, a drawbridge across it, and heavy gates guarded by warriors in shining armor. After fulfilling some formalities, such as signing a state secrets clause, my sister and I were enlisted in the garrison of this fortress, Valentina, as a progress street chaser, because she had already turned 18 and had a school leaving certificate, and me as an ordinary worker due to my youth and lack of any professional skills. It took me half a year to adjust to the rhythm of factory life and to make friends with the other workers. I was accepted into the Young Communist League. In May 1934, I transferred to the turner's shop, where I spent about a month training and then earned the right to work independently, soon acquiring the qualification of turner, 6th grade. It was an interesting time. The arsenal was changing before our very eyes. New lathes of Soviet manufacture were being introduced, improved equipment was installed, new production capacities were coming into force, and old premises were being renovated. Seeing the efforts made by the authorities to expand the industry, the factory folk responded with extra effort. Incidentally, the prices paid for our wares also rose noticeably, and the lathe operators in our workshop operated on a piecework basis. I had no cause to complain. I had a screw-shaping turning lathe with a DIP 300 gearbox made by Moscow's Red Proletariat factory in 1933. DIP came from the initials of the Russian words Dogonim и Peregonim, which means we will catch up and overtake. It was designed to process cylindrical, conical, and complex surfaces, both external and internal. I remember much of it as if it were yesterday, stockpiles of shafts for every possible gear. With one stroke of the cutting tool, I would shave off between 0.5 and 3 millimeter or more of metal. I would choose the cutting speed in accordance with the hardness of the material and the durability of the tool. In general, tools made from high carbon steel were used, although there were others with soldered discs of super hard tungsten and titanium alloys. The sight of dark blue-violet metal shavings curling out from under the blade still strikes me as incredibly beautiful. However hard the metal, it yields to human strength. You merely need to devise a sleek enough implementation. While uniting people in work, our factory also presented them with the opportunity to spend their free time in a sensible way. True, the factory club did not stand out for its bright and lavish decor. It was small, even cramped. However, its premises were sufficient for the activities of various circles: a blue-collar workers, theatrical group, an art studio which taught drawing, dressmaking and sewing, and gliding and shooting clubs. The assembly hall was a regular venue for special festive evenings held under the slogan "Three Generations Together," at which veterans of the Revolution and Civil War and young production workers who had exceeded their quotas by 50% and more were honored. At first, my friend and I opted for the gliding circle. There was a lot in the newspapers about aviation and the feats of pilots, so we enthusiastically attended the theoretical classes and attentively took notes in lectures given by a gallant Air Force lieutenant on the lifting force of an airplane wing. However, my first flight with an instructor decidedly cooled my ardor. When the grassy field of the aerodrome rushed swiftly to meet us and then suddenly receded somewhere below, my head began to spin and I could feel the nausea in my throat. In other words, the air is not my element, I thought to myself. I am a profoundly terrestrial being and have to have my feet on solid ground. The instructor of the factory shooting circle, Fyodor Koshchenko, worked in our shop and constantly urged young people to come to the shooting range. He had recently done emergency service in the Red Army and become keen on shooting. He assured us there was something entrancing about the flight of a bullet and the way it hit the target. A likable and charming lad, Fyodor tried to persuade me to join with similar arguments. However, I remembered my flight in the glider, which had pretty soundly shaken my faith in my abilities, even though when you are young they seem boundless. Apart from that, I regarded Kushchenko's talk as commonplace skirt chasing. My limited but harsh life experience prompted me, always to be on my guard with members of the opposite sex. One day, at a Young Communist League meeting, I got sick of listening to Kushchenko's stories. I answered Fyodor in a sarcastic tone. Those sitting around us appreciated my joke and laughed loudly. Our league organizer was at that moment reading a rather boring report on the work of Ukrainian league members towards early fulfillment of the workshop quarterly plan. He thought the laughter was directed at him and got very angry. A verbal skirmish arose between him and some of the league members was in the hall, in the course of which some colorful epithets and unlikely comparisons were employed. In the end, the organizer expelled Kushchenko and me from the room as the instigators of the disturbance. Stunned by this banishment, Kushchenko and I made our way towards the exit. The working day was over, and our steps echoed through the empty corridor. Suddenly, Kushchenko said, "We really need to calm ourselves down." "We do," I agreed. "So let's go to the range and have a few shots." "Do you think that'll help?" "Of course. Shooting is a sport for calm people, although inborn abilities are also required." "And what other abilities?" I could not refrain from a vitriolic question. "The most down-to-earth kind, such as a good eye or a precise feel for the weapon," he replied, jangling a bunch of keys he had taken from the pocket of his leather jacket. The shooting range was located on some reserve factory land adjacent to the main building. No doubt it had once been storage space, a long, low structure with bars on the windows, which were located almost under the roof. From the lofty heights of my present knowledge, I can say that the Arsenal range in the mid-1930s met all the necessary standards. There was a room with desks, chairs, and a blackboard on the wall for theoretical classes, a small armory with lockable cupboards for rifles and pistols, a safe for ammunition, and a firing line allowing one to fire from a rest, kneeling, standing, or lying on mats. 25 meters away from it were thick wooden shields on which targets were mounted. Father opened one of the cabinets and took out a newish rifle, which was not that long, just over a meter, but fitted with a massive birch stock and a thick barrel. This item from the Tula Arms Factory was well known in the USSR under the brand name 208. It was manufactured between 1932 and 1946, and together with the modified TOZ-8M, it seems that about 1 million of them were made. This reliable, simple, small-bore, single-shot rifle with a longitudinally sliding bolt designed for 5.6 x 16 mm rimfire ammunition rendered valuable service not only to sportsmen but also to hunters. I write about it with affection, for it was with the TOZ-8 that my enthusiasm for rifle shooting began, my apprenticeship. as a sharpshooter. There are detailed instructions on handling firearms. Of course, Kushchenko could have talked about them first. Instead, he did something different. He simply handed me the rifle and said, "Get acquainted." To be honest, I had thought firearms were much heavier and more difficult to hold in one's hands, but this rifle weighed less than 3.5 kilograms. Given my experience of sometimes setting up quite cumbersome items for processing on the lathe, it took no effort on my part to lift it. I also found the coldish, chilly metal of the barrel and the receiver pleasant. The downward curved shape of the bolt handle indicated that the designers had considered the convenience of the person in charge of the weapon. First of all, Fyodor suggested checking the rifle's flexibility to find out if it was suitable for me. In this regard, everything turned out fine. The back of the butt fitted firmly into the hollow of my shoulder. With my right hand, I could freely grasp the grip of the butt and placed my index finger, and I have long fingers, on the trigger between the first and second phalanx. It just remained to incline my head to the right, press my cheek to the comb of the butt, and focus my open right eye on the sights. The sighting bar was right in the middle of the notch and was visible in its entire magnitude. "Now you can fire," said Fyodor. "What about cartridges?" "Just a minute." The instructor took the rifle from me, loaded it, and pointed it at a target. There was a loud sound, like a rod striking a metal sheet. I started in surprise. Kushchenko smiled. "That's from not being used to it. Have a go. You can do it." The rifle ended up in my hands again. Painstakingly replicating all the moves involved in positioning it, I took my first shot. The Melkashka, as we called the T-08, did not have a powerful recoil. Besides, on Fyodor's advice, I had pressed it firmly into my shoulder, so that I would not feel any unpleasant sensation. Kushchenko allowed me 3 more shots and then went to look at the target. He brought the paper sheet inscribed with black circles back to the firing line, where I was waiting for him, not without some nervousness. He looked closely at me and said, "For a beginner, that is simply amazing. It's clear you have ability." "Surely not inborn," I felt compelled to joke for some reason. "It certainly is." My first coach was serious. I had never seen Fyodor Kushchenko so serious. Our shooting circle held sessions once a week on Saturdays. We began by studying the mechanism of a small bore rifle in detail, stripping and assembling the breech block, and getting into the habit of caring for the weapon thoroughly, cleaning and oiling it. Classes were held in the room with the blackboard, where the basics of ballistics were taught. I was surprised to learn that a bullet does not fly directly to its target, but owing to the impact of gravity and wind resistance, describes an arc as well as revolving as it flies. We also had lectures on the history of firearms. It began in the 15th century with matchlock guns, when technical developments first made it possible to use the projectile properties of gunpowder. Then flintlock weapons came to be widely used, followed by the caplock mechanism. The truly revolutionary change occurred at the end of the 19th century, with the advent of rifles with magazines, grooves in the barrel, and longitudinally sliding bolts, facilitating rapid loading, a longer range, and greater accuracy. Manual firearms seem to me to represent the most perfect creation of the human mind and hand. Their construction always made use of the latest innovations. The technological solutions necessary for their manufacture were quickly refined and put into a production process that output thousands and millions of items. In the case of the most successful models, those worthy of world recognition, engineering genius finds its fulfillment in an ideal and consummate external shape. In their own way, firearms are beautiful. They are pleasant to pick up and convenient to use. They earn the love of the people who took them into wars of unbelievable ferocity. Some of them, like the Mosin 3-line rifle, the Shpagin submachine gun, the Degtyarev light machine gun, and the Tula Tokarev pistol, have even become unique symbols of their era. However, most of all, my friends liked the actual shooting. We practiced this at the firing range, aiming at targets from a variety of positions, standing, lying, from a rest, kneeling, and aiming with the aid of a strap under the left arm. The Melkashka had only an open backside with a movable ring, and at the end of the barrel, a cylindrical front sight with an extended base. For all its simplicity of construction, it nevertheless helped us develop basic firing skills, rapid aiming, smooth pressure on the trigger, and holding the rifle in the right position, without dropping it to left or right. With a muzzle velocity of 320 meters per second, a TOZ-8 shot attained distances of 180 meters, but in a shooting range this was of no significance. When spring came, we began traveling to a firing range out of town and training to reach the standards of the Voroshilov marksman's badge, 2nd degree. This included not just sharpshooting, but also finding one's bearings in a locality, grenade throwing, and physical training, such as running, vaulting, and push-ups. We fulfilled all these tasks successfully, and then took part in the Osoaviakim city shooting competitions. I want to point out that our circle was only one of several hundred units within the structure of Osoaviakim, the Society for Promoting Defense, Aviation and Chemical Construction. This mass-scale, voluntary, public, patriotic military organization was originally set up in our country in 1927 and played a large role in training young men and women for army service. Its ranks numbered about 14 million people who trained in the primary organizations of this society, acquiring specialized military skills, from those of pilot and parachutist to rifleman, machine gunner, lorry driver, and dog trainer. I earned an honorary certificate at the Osoaviakim competitions, which I put in a frame and hung on the wall in the room in Puida, which Valentina and I shared. Neither my sister nor my parents took my enthusiasm for shooting seriously. In our domestic life, they enjoyed joking about my passion for weaponry. I was unable to explain to them what drew me to the shooting range, what was attractive about an object equipped with a metal barrel, a wooden butt, a breech, a trigger, and sights, and why it was so interesting to control the flight of a bullet towards its target. With the authorization of the Young Communist League, at the end of 1935, I went on a 2-week course for draftsmen and copyists. I completed it with distinction and began work as a senior draftsman in the mechanical workshop. I enjoyed this work. Of course, it was different from being a Turner lathe operator, but it also demanded concentration and accuracy. The lathes hummed away on the other side of the wall, but in our office we worked in silence amidst drawing boards and bundles of drafting paper, checking blueprints and preparing them for transfer to the production workers. Relations between team members were friendly. My enthusiasm for shooting was treated with understanding here. I am very grateful to the Arsenal factory. In the 4 years I spent within its walls, I acquired 2 specialist qualifications and became used to working in a defense industry enterprise where semi-military discipline operated. I matured and began to feel like a real person capable of answering for my aims and actions and achieving a set goal. The Factory Young Communist League organization also helped me to transition to a new stage in life. In the spring of 1935, I received authorization to attend the Workers' Preparatory Faculty at Kiev State University. Then I worked for a year in the turner's shop and studied in the evenings. After that, I passed the exams, and in September 1936, I became the holder of a student card in the history faculty of Kiev State University. In this way, my childhood dream was fulfilled, even if I was probably the oldest female student on the course. This concludes the first part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. What do you think of Pavlichenko's story? Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.